If you're looking for a clean, sober, professional, academic,
well-researched, historically accurate, generally accurate, serious podcast
on Southern folklore, ghosts, bizarre events, and unique people,
this podcast is not for you.
However, if you've decided you can live with that,
then join us for The Strange South.
The Strange South.
Hi, Patrice.
Hi, Marleah. Oh, man. I'm sweating already.
It's summertime now because it's, not quite Easter in the South. So we all dodged the bullet of storms last night. Well, we did. Not everybody did.
Not everybody did. I know. There was some bad storm damage, but luckily I was only up till 4, and then I did get to sleep a little bit, so I didn't have to worry about everybody.
So if we sound punchy today,
yes,
we are definitely just the Cuban mojitos.
It is a Sunday, and we're recording, and so lots of stuff has happened this week, and it's just been crazy because just weird things. Don't really want to go into it, but yes, we're both very kind of punchy and hoping that the drink will kind of settle us down.
Well, we have Bartender Courtney back, so our drink is
Bartender Courtney, who visited Robert the doll and has photos, and I'm very excited. I'm hoping you'll let us post those.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Video tour as well.
Yeah, she did a video tour of the outside and inside.
If we remember, make a note. I'm going to make a note. We're going to post these on the website. Also on the website, I included a sign-up form for the news group or a newsletter to go out, and what I'm wanting to do is kind of build up this base of people that we can send episodes to and information about the episodes to earlier before they actually go live. And also if we have, we're talking about doing t-shirts and maybe have some t-shirt giveaways coming up soon. And we'll do that through social media, but you'll hear about it through the newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, go to thestrangesouth.com and you should see a pop-up and sign up for that, and that'll just keep you abreast of everything that happens.
Abreast.
And hopefully we're trying to fix a live show before we do PodX at the end of May. So if you live in Central Alabama, we'll be hopefully announcing that pretty soon and figuring out how the hell we're going to do a live show.
Yeah, we've got some stuff to work out.
We do have some stuff, but it'll be fun. It'll be like the first live show, and
we have a place in mind.
We
and
do.
The place happens to be haunted and happens to have a long history, so that could be super cool.
So cross your fingers. Let's hope this happens, and hopefully you can come join us for our inaugural first live show and all the craziness that'll probably happen. Woohoo. Also, another something in big news, big postmortem. We were contacted by the Scotts.
Yes!
From Rockford, Alabama.
That was so freaking awesome.
So the people that we talked about in episode...
was that 3?
3 maybe?
Or 6?
Or it was an earlier episode.
Yes.
The Haint Blue episode. The people that we actually were talking about contacted us and were like, they loved how we presented their story, and they were very happy. Thank God, they were very happy.
Yeah,
with
I know.
it. And
we're now friends on Facebook.
Yes.
So it was episode 6. Okay,
episode
thank
6.
you.
Yes.
Okay, yes, Robert the Doll was episode 3.
So the Rockford
Yes.
haunting. So yeah, that was major cool. I love when that happens.
Yes. So hi, Jenny.
Yes. Hello,
you're out
Scotts.
there.
Thank you. We appreciate it. This weekend I went to Columbus, Georgia, and it is definitely, you cannot get there from here, kind of weird back road situations. And when I was driving down there, and we got there finally, because it's like 2.5 hours from where we live, and I was like, Chad, we're going to take the main roads next time, right? Because it's very active driving. It's hilly, curvy, tractors on the road. It's like you can't just set your, cruise and whatnot. And he was like, no, that was the main road. I was like, shit. Oh my God. So But on the way there, like, we were on 431, and like just down the road, I start seeing like this weird monolithic sculpture thing, and it is the haunted chicken house.
Yes.
And they have like maybe 10 hearse out front, like stacked on top of each other. It's like it's this huge thing. And I was just like, how come I know nothing about this?
Oh, I know about it.
Okay.
I know about the haunted chicken house.
Have you been?
No, I have not, because I am terrified of haunted houses.
What is a haunted chicken house? And
it's one of the most popular haunted houses in our area. So people actually drive pretty long distances to get to the haunted chicken house when it's like Halloween season.
Is it a haunted chicken? Is it like haunted by chickens? I mean, what's the haunting part going on? I want to know what the chicken is. Is it like a euphemism for, like, you know, sex workers' house or something? I just know. What is the chicken part of it? I don't understand.
Where did that even come from?
Well, you know, I don't know. It's out in the country. I just passed probably like the Klan hangout, you know, on the way there with all the Confederate flags and stuff. And then I see like chicken house, and I'm like,
does it have
what does that mean?
So,
is it like
you've never been, Courtney?
No, I've seen it.
Teresa, have you been to the haunted chicken house? Okay, our friend Teresa is here. Yes,
it's like right down
the Dixie
road.
General Store, because they have signs on the highway too. That's like, turn around right now, get back to the Dixie General Store. Haunted chicken house. I don't even know if it's based on a real haunted thing or if it's just like a super marketed chicken house.
I just like chicken coops, right? Whereas like there's a billion chickens like walking around on the floor. It's like little chicken zombies. What are we talking about? What am I gonna be involved in here?
I think we should invest in this idea though. Now I think that kind of haunted chicken house would scare the absolute shit out of a bunch of people I know. It's just one of those. I think it's just one of those where they take you through, and there's like freaky ass clowns jumping out with chainsaws and shit. Okay. I think that's what it is.
Because I mean, how do you? So like, if it was like a slaughterhouse, right? And it, you know, you would have like chainsaws and meat hooks and stuff. I understand the horror of that. I don't understand the horror of how you kill chickens. You know, it's like slinging them by the neck, popping them their heads off. I mean, I just don't know. Anyway, so I was very fast. I thought about this a lot. If you could tell.
Chicken. Oh my God, I'm never gonna be able to think about it the same way now.
I just didn't know. I didn't know. So yeah, so that was my postmortem for today.
We'll be looking into that. I'm sure
we will be looking into that and possibly going as well.
God, it's so funny because we were just saying it feels like we haven't done this in 3 weeks. It's like we hold off recording for a couple days, and now I'm like, did that all happen just this past week? Is that even possible?
I know. It's weird time warp thing happens when we don't do it on Friday.
Let's do the time. So,
okay.
I don't think I have anything else. If I do, it's just buried in the recesses of my brain.
Okay. Cool.
I don't know.
So I guess I'll go first. Give me a second. Like Chuck. No. All right. So today, this week, I posted a picture of my grandmother who passed away back in Christmas Day. She passed away.
That was a very cool picture.
And it was when she was in her 40s and 50s. They lived in Lumberton, Mississippi. So Lumberton is like halfway between Hattiesburg and the coast. And my grandfather was the postmaster at the time. So they bought like this house, you know, on Main Street. It was antebellum. It was really cool because they were digging a basement underneath. It had like a crawl space. And they were digging out underneath it, and they would find all these really cool engraved medicinal bottles that just got buried underneath, and she would collect them. I remember she'd have like just a windowsill full of, you know, medicinal bottles from back in the day when they were selling all kinds of snake oil and whatnot, and probably really good drugs in them too. Right? And so I have very vivid memories. I also it was one of the houses that I remember being in and hearing kitty cats, and I could never find them. So those were like the ghost kitties. Ooh. You know, so I had ghost kitties, you know, growing up as a child.
Ghost kitties.
So she lives in Lumberton, Mississippi. And last year I read about this and I'm like, no way. And I no way because of what happened. It was just strange. And then no way because it happened so close to where they lived in Lumberton, Mississippi. So back in the 60s, the United States and Great Britain and the Soviet Union agreed to sign like a treaty that's banning partial testing of nuclear weapons.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so this prohibited nuclear testing to be in the atmosphere, underwater, or in space. So, of course, if you list 3 things where it can't be, you're damn straight they're going to find out some other place to do it. So this was Project Dribble. It's just a horrible name. This is the worst name ever.
I'm pretty sure that shows up on a porn site somewhere.
Oh my God. Worst name. I don't even know. I don't even know.
Project Dribble. So
Project Dribble took place in Mississippi, 28 miles southwest of Hattiesburg in the Tatum Salt Dome. And this was like a massive Mesozoic, thank you, salt deposit that was about 1,000 feet underground. So, of course, I had to look up, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
I don't remember, right? So the Mesozoic period was like 252 to 66 million years ago. Weird number range.
It's so funny because it gets to that part and it's just like once you talk about millions of years ago, you're just like
it could be one or could be like 500.
It was a long time ago.
It was a really long time ago. But it was also known as like the age of reptiles. So it was like when dinosaurs were roaming. So this is when this salt deposit formed. However, salt deposits, I have no idea, right? But anyway, so at 10 a.m. on October 22nd, 1964, Project Dribble had a sub-project called Project Salmon. I don't know. I'm not making this stuff up, right? Can't make this stuff up.
Like Project Spit.
Right. And what they did is they detonated a 5.3 kiloton. Shit.
Kiloton.
Kiloton. Thank you. Did I say that word? I'm staring right at it. Kiloton nuclear device that was detonated in Lamar County, Mississippi.
Oh my God.
So we have actually had a nuclear bomb detonated in Mississippi and in the South, and it's the only one.
What the hell?
So this bomb was about the third of the size that the one that was dropped in Hiroshima in 1945. It created this huge cavity in the salt mine underneath the ground that was like 2,500 feet, and that's long, and that's about a half a mile. I have to look up. I have to compare things, or just numbers don't make sense to me. And when they did that in this community, it's like it was a big deal. It's like all the people came to watch. They paid children $5 and adults $10 that lived in the area when they were going to do this.
Wait, I'm sorry. That was their payoff for we're going to set off a fucking nuclear bomb in your neighborhood?
Yep.
$5 and $10.
Rural Mississippi.
Jesus Christ.
Right? And this is like really, because Lumberton was pretty rural, and this is outside of Lumberton. So it is really like the poor rural Mississippi place that they're taking advantage of. Okay.
Yeah.
So when this happened, when they set it off, and they've got really great photos, and there's actually a video online that shows one of the detonations because they did it twice. And it shows, it's not really good. And I bet you there's better pictures and better video because of all like everybody, the way that they show people taking photos and had the cameras rolling and stuff like that. But they do show it. They say that the earth rose and rolled in waves and that pecans fell from the trees. Dogs howled in fear and creeks ran black from being disturbed sediment, shaken loose. Buildings 30 miles away swayed for minutes on end. So it fucked a lot of shit up when they set off this first bomb. And of course, shortly after that, hundreds of residents filed damage claims to the government, citing burst pipes, cracked masonry, and suddenly dry wells.
Did they, was there some like, oh, you took our $10, you don't get to file claims?
I'm sure. I don't know. I don't know if there was a signing off or if it was just an understanding or I don't know. 2 years later, they came back and were going to do it again. So this to me says a lot about really what they were doing and how much they knew it was going to impact stuff. So on September 22nd, 1966, they were supposed to set off Project Sterling, which was like the most, I guess, common name or
the most appropriate
name. Yes. Thank you. Not common, but most appropriate name out of all of these names. So they're supposed to detonate a second bomb, but they postponed it because the wind direction was not ideal.
Okay.
So, just keep that in your brain, right? So they waited till December 1966, and they took the bomb and they put it in the cavern that was already detonated. So like the cavern where the first bomb, they wanted to test to see if they could test bombs underground and it be detectable. I think that was the main point. And so they used a smaller bomb in the cavity than the first one. And they did it. They got the test. They considered it basically a success. They found out, what they wanted to find out, which I don't know if it was detectable or not, or if they found it was undetectable, then maybe it happened more than they claimed it's happened, right? And a sensor was like lowered 3 months afterward. A sensor was lowered into the pit, and the temperature in the pit still measured over 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
3 months later?
3 months later after they did the last bomb.
Holy shit.
So, people there in that county, they're poor, but they're not dumb. Mm-hmm. They know that if you start, blowing up, the A-bomb or whatever in the vicinity, that there's going to be repercussions and stuff. Something's going to happen. So they were worried about radiation poisoning, like, duh, as you should be. Yeah, that was going to be
the next thing I was going to ask,
right? Yeah. But, of course, government officials said that this was highly unlikely. And they pointed out that the 2,700-foot shaft had been filled with gravel, and it served as an enormous concrete plug.
Oh.
And scientists reassured Mississippians by reporting that all radiation levels had been contained underground. Well, that's freaking fine, but guess what happens to underground stuff? It seeps through, right?
And you said like wells went dry and water is down there and people use water.
But they said that the soil, water, and the air in the area was not made radioactive. Government officials erected a large stone monument at the site with a brass plaque warning future generations not to drill or dig in the vicinity, probably for freaking ever, right? Of this test site. And soon afterwards, some Lamar County residents started to complain of lingering health effects in the decades after the blast. They saw an increased number of cancer deaths at the Tatum Salt Dome area. And they saw that it was like higher than national average. And, of course, federal officials maintained that there was no health risk in living near the Tatum Salt Dome site. However, they did pay at least one former Mississippi employee of Project Dribble for unspecific health damages.
I'm sorry.
I know. You can't say that with a serious face, right? So, in 2010, the U.S. government actually transferred that land to the state of Mississippi, and it is a state timber preserve. And you can visit it today if you want to by going. You have to ask permission. It's by appointment only. But it's about, 2.5 miles down some dirt road in the middle of Mississippi.
I wonder if the timber is radioactive.
That's what I'm saying. Well, and I was wondering, it's like, well, they said timber preserve, so I'm thinking that they're not wanting to cut the trees down, because one thing that Mississippi has a lot of is trees, and they have like big industry with trees, and Weyerhaeuser makes toilet paper, so you'll have like radioactive toilet paper.
Oh God, yeah, that's just where I want my radiation to go.
But I think it being a preserve, that it's fine. But still, God. You blow something up. We know radiation leaks. You know that you cannot fully. I don't think salt fully contains it.
You may say
may say that they plugged the hole. But, you know, what did you say?
I said you may say that it dribbles.
Yes, you may say that. But I just learned about this, like last year, and I was like, holy fuck. I was like, that is just monumental for something like that to happen, and everybody... You know, and of course, the residents knew about it. It's not like they came in the middle of the night and did it. It was like a sideshow, and they've got like, it is well documented. They've actually got really nice black and white photos, and there's like a bunch of stuff about it. But still, it's like you don't go into people's backyard and detonate a nuclear bomb.
No. Oh my God, that's fucked up. Like,
it is fucked up.
Have you ever read about like the actual impacts of those bombs? Like, what they did in Hiroshima, and oh my God, it is mind blowing.
Yeah, I don't know if I can handle that.
No, I mean,
well, even like when they had the what was it, the meltdown over in Japan, or they had the tsunami, and it got into the plant, and it leaked out into the ocean, and they were finding radioactive fish being caught over in the Pacific. And so it's like, who knows? That's a lot of our like salmon and
that's true.
Crabs and stuff like that are all up in that. So who knows what we've been eating?
Radioactive crabs, radioactive toilet paper. I'm starting to think like the Simpsons. They all knew like three-eyed fish.
Three-eyed fish. Exactly. But you know, it just kind of pisses me off that it was rural. It was not rural enough. Mm-hmm. You know, it was in a community. There were people around. There's pictures of when it went off. It like people had to rebuild their chimneys because their chimneys collapsed. And there's pictures of like some of the damage of just like somebody let a bomb off, and you know things just fell down in houses and broke, and you know stuff. So just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And that's my story for the week.
That is nuts.
Yeah, Mississippi A-bomb.
You know, we both took the historical route this week. We're going to be like, this is the nerd episode.
It may be.
I'm
kind of excited about that because, you know, sometimes we do have this vibe where we do the same, like, really, like when we did the killer babysitter of Florida and, you know, the two guys in Georgia being murdered. I was so depressed I felt so bad after that episode. I was like, these are horrible people. And now I know, it's not, sometimes, you know, ignorance is bliss, but it just hit me all of a sudden, like soon after we did that, about how horrible that episode was. How depressing. Like murder and baby murders. And
well, at least this one's not well, it's a little depressing. I mean, you know,
but it's not like
the government's trying to kill us and all.
Just government just don't give a shit. But, so what's new?
It's true. All right, let me take a pee break and then I'll tell you mine.
Excellent.
You showed me yours, I'll show you mine.
And then you see what she did. It was very clever. All right, we are back live.
Ooh, listen to you. We are back live on WKRP.
In Cincinnati.
All right, well, so I said we did history this week, and
it's History Week.
It's again like it's Nerd Week. It's Nerd Week here on the Strange South. We do have nerds.
We are nerds.
We have nerds down here. We are nerds, or we wouldn't have both researched these things this week. So I couldn't think of what I was going to do this week, and I ended up kind of rediscovering the Oxford American magazine, which I'm probably going to subscribe to, but there's a whole bunch of like folklore and South and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
In there.
I've heard of that, but I'm not really sure, like,
I may share a link or something to it, but
Oxford, are we talking about like England Oxford?
No.
Or Mississippi Oxford or Alabama Oxford?
I think Mississippi Oxford.
Okay.
Because it seems it's like primarily Southern stuff. It's something that I should really remember better and know more about because I used to know more about it. But they had an article from 1995. It's been around forever. They had an article from 1995 by a guy named Daryl Hannah. Wrote this. No, Barry Hannah. And it was called Inside Louisiana's Leper Colony. And I was like, what?
What?
Like, what does that mean?
This is vaguely setting off like memory
Is it? So maybe you know
sparks.
some of this.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
So in 1888, a doctor at Charity Hospital in New Orleans released data that showed that not only was there a surprisingly large number of leprosy cases being freely admitted to his hospital, but the illnesses were not being brought in from people who had been abroad. They were like endemic. They were like local to Louisiana. So these people had never been anywhere else where they could get leprosy. Like you think of leprosy and you don't really think of the United States.
Of like old England.
Exactly. Or like, medieval times or India in the slums or something like that. Right. And so, he's saying, yeah, we've got quite a bit of leprosy here, and we're treating them. So, there you go. And because of this admission, like a couple of years later, the Daily Picayune did an article that was like, it was like a public service article alerting residents that there was a physician who was under a state contract to care for leprosy patients in what they called in this article a pest house near Bayou St. John in New Orleans. And people went fucking apeshit because they're like,
come out with their torches.
Yes, it's insane. I mean, and so because people went apeshit, state of Louisiana passed an 1892 law saying that anybody who was diagnosed with leprosy had to be quarantined in a specific hospital.
It's a highly contagious disease, right?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay, because I have no idea what leprosy is.
I think that's part of the thing. That's like one of the biggest things about this story. So I'll tell you this kind of history part of where it was in Louisiana, and then I'll tell you about leprosy itself.
I'll be patient.
So come on, Patrice.
Sorry.
I have a flow here. It's written. I've got subtitles on this page. I'll tell you what they are in a minute. They're kind of funny. But there's some. So anyway, so in 1892, state of Louisiana said anybody who was diagnosed with leprosy in the state had to be treated in a certain place. And so they were quarantined by force and taken what was called like the leprosarium, the Louisiana leper home at the time. And it was in, what they would call like a leper colony. And it was in Carville, Louisiana. And eventually over time, people just called it Carville. It's west of New Orleans, south of Baton Rouge. So like if you're on Route 10, like it's just like in a little bend of the Mississippi River, kind of a little ways off of Route 10, south of Baton Rouge. And the location, it was like 350 acres. And the place was massive, this institution that they had these people in. It was super isolated. You could only, you weren't going to get there by accident. Right. Was basically it. You had to go way out of your way to get there.
Like Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
Sorry, Columbus, Georgia. You are great.
Sorry, Columbus.
I love the downtown area.
You're super pretty. We love you.
Yes.
So the first.
To get to.
What'd you say?
Sorry.
Did you not start this by saying you were not going to talk over me this week?
Which guarantees that I'm going to overtalk you. Sorry. My apologies.
So the first 7 patients of this hospital, this leprosarium, were from New Orleans, and they arrived like in December 1894, and they had to ferry them in the middle of the night to the hospital because everybody was so freaked out about anybody even being admitted there. Like they wanted them to be quarantined, but they couldn't even stand the idea of them like crossing the water. So they had to do it in the middle of the night. There were 31 patients within 2 years. There were 4 Catholic sisters from it was Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul who cared for the patients. And sisters from that order were the only registered nurses who were willing to care for these patients for more than 4 decades.
Oh, wow.
So they couldn't get people to come in and care for them, and these were the only people that were willing to do it. And then in 1921, the U.S. passed a national law requiring anybody in the continental U.S. who was diagnosed with leprosy be held indefinitely at Carville for quarantine until they had medical clearance, and they never would get medical clearance.
Okay.
So it was basically like Oh, and by the way, Hawaii actually has an island. Like the territory of Hawaii had this happen in like 1866. So they already had like an island that was for lepers.
And I think that's what I read something about, like a leper island or something.
So, you know, it was, this is like the only leper colony in the continental U.S., but Hawaii did have one. Yeah, so like eventually the U.S. Public Health Service took over the facility and funded a budget towards leprosy research. But this law passed said, like, if you are diagnosed with leprosy, you are legally required to drop everything, your life, your family, your people, everything, and be committed into this institution until they let you go.
Wow.
And there was no treatment for leprosy when it started. And so it was just like, well, this is your life now.
Yes, a death sentence, basically.
So the subtitle of our next section is Let's Learn About Leprosy.
Yay, because I know
exclamation point.
Contagious? Is it airborne?
Well, and that's the thing is because like when I think of leprosy, all I can think of is like this movie that completely like bombed in the early 90s called City of Joy, and I watched it because Patrick Swayze was in it, and I was like in love with Patrick Swayze. And
interesting.
But it was about like some asshole who lived in like the slums in India or something like that, and like ended up like learning about impoverished communities and leprosy there. And obviously I didn't learn anything because I had to relearn it all when I was doing research for this. But so yeah, like what we just talked about, like you probably only really heard about leprosy in like the Bible, like Leviticus talks about leprosy, Middle Ages documentaries.
Yeah, I totally heard about it there.
Yeah. But so it like traditionally, and we'd like to think that this was like thousands of years ago, but you know, it's not true. Traditionally, people looked at it more as a punishment from God than like a disease. And so, you know, it was like uncleanliness. So like whenever you hear people making the joke, like unclean, they're talking about lepers. Like that's what they're talking about.
Okay.
So when you think about it, you're thinking about like people who have like, they kind of look like their faces are falling off. Like people who have stumps instead of hands. They have a hard time getting around. You know, they would always, you know, in underdeveloped countries, they would end up being beggars on the street. You know, it was in Europe in the Middle Ages, like leprosy sufferers had to ring bells and walk on certain sides of the street depending on which way the wind was blowing, because they had to wear certain clothes. All of this because people like had to be given every opportunity to get as far away from them as possible.
You know how freaked out we get when like flu season hits. And there's like 6 people out and we got like our mask on and the Lysol.
That's true. And I mean, and that's the flu. That's not like your hands might fall off. You know what I mean?
Or your face melt off.
So
it's horrifying.
Yeah, it's there was an article that I actually read. This is me completely nerding out. This is like 100% like, and I'll give you a link for it.
You went down the rabbit hole, huh?
Totally academic like article titled "Termination of the Leprosy Isolation Policy in the U.S. and Japan: Science, Policy Changes, and the Garbage Can Model," by Hajime Sato and Janet France. And there was a quote in there though that I really liked.
Hold on.
Leprosy.
Sorry,
what?
I'm interrupting you.
Go.
You had me at garbage can model.
Garbage can model. They describe it all in the paper. They're talking about like the way that politicians dealt with this issue, and that this isolation quarantine policy was very questionable.
Yeah, I took it totally chicken form. Go ahead. Sorry.
Chickens. But their quote was, "Leprosy was dreaded not because it killed, but because it left one alive with no hope." So leprosy wasn't necessarily something that was going to kill you. But like all people saw of it was disfigurement. I mean, you were absolutely cast out of society. I mean, you ended up looking like a monster in their eyes, you know. And so in 1873, there was a scientist named Gerhard Hansen who discovered that leprosy is actually just a bacterial infection.
Oh, wow.
It's caused by a really slow-growing bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae, and it was renamed Hansen's disease after he made this discovery.
Okay.
And once they figured out what it was, they learned a whole lot more about how it works. So when I say it's slow growing, like you can have leprosy for 3 to 20 years before you're symptomatic at all.
Oh, wow.
So, and when you do, you get skin lesions, So usually like hands, feet, it happens a lot in the extremities, and it affects like the facial muscles and the mucous membranes in your face. But it impacts your nerves, your skin, the lining of your nose, the lining of your eyes.
It sounds very painful.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. The reason you see people with lost limbs, it's not like, I think we tend to think of it as like a flesh-eating bacteria. That's not what it is. It causes nerve damage, so you can't feel your extremities. So you injure yourself constantly, and you don't get it treated because you don't realize you're hurt. So if you're left untreated, your feet and hands, you'll burn yourself, you'll cut yourself, you'll get infected, you don't get treatment. You can get ulcers in your eyes because of the nerve damage in your eyes. I don't know if you've seen, like, a lot of people have seen this saddle nose thing that like cocaine addicts get, where the bridge of your nose collapses because the cartilage is, that happens in leprosy. So you see a lot of people who don't seem to have noses. And there is a lot of blindness in untreated leprosy. So that's why people are like freaking out about leprosy. Carville was like the clinic and the research facility. And so just about every advance in treatment happened at Carville. In 1941, they developed a chemotherapy that made it completely non-contagious. And then in the 50s, they developed a multi-drug treatment that requires like up to 2 years of kind of a cocktail of antibiotics that cures it completely. Like, you can be cured of leprosy. And they did that here. But here's the thing. So we think that people with Hansen's disease were quarantined because of the contagion. Like you were saying, the first thing you said about leprosy was like, it's really contagious, right? Because that's what we think. That's what like everybody says, unclean. But that's not it. And the government fucking knew it. So in the 1890s, scientific literature always described Hansen's disease as relatively non-contagious. It's like, it's a slow-moving bacterium, but it's really, really weak. So to develop leprosy, somebody would need to be in constant, very close contact with an infected person for an extended period of time. And even then, it's really hard to get the infection from them. You can't get it from shaking hands.
Well, see, that was going to be my next
sex.
question. Is like, so is this like across the classes kind of disease? But it sounds like this more is an impoverished.
It's still it tends to be a poverty thing, but not exclusively. Right. I mean, it could, but they actually don't. They have ideas now where it comes from, but they're not 100% sure. But like 95% of people are naturally immune to leprosy, to Hansen's disease. Okay. Just naturally. Like, I don't know if that's the United States or what, but I mean, there is a natural immunity. 95% of people can't catch it, even if they sneeze straight in your face. You wouldn't be able to catch it. Ugh. And no employee at this place ever contracted the disease from a patient.
I guess that was going to be my next question. Yeah, it's like the nuns,
Even though they kept like completely separate facilities, they were like, it was like a twin facility. So everything that the patients had, they had separate cafeterias, separate dorms, separate, like every single thing was duplicated for the sick on one side and the well on the other. And in 1945, the American Public Health Association advised against isolating people with leprosy at all. The World Health Organization did the same thing. But the U.S. quarantine laws that I said were put in place in 1921 were not even eased until the 60s. And they weren't legally removed until the 1990s. So, like, even when they created Carville, scientists knew that leprosy was not that contagious. And they legally mandated that these people lose their entire lives to go to this institution. And in 1921, they absolutely knew it. And they made the entire nation, like everybody in the country who had it, had to go to Carville. So it's like, it's crazy, right?
That is crazy.
So because the quarantine wasn't based on contagion, it was based on fear. It was based on like that idea that you're not going to die, you're going to be disfigured. And that's the really scary part. Like, it doesn't matter that it's not that contagious, that like minuscule percentage that you could catch this is enough to ruin these people's lives. Yeah. So, that's like, and when it was talking about like, you can't catch it by shaking hands, you can't pass it on to children in birth. Like, that's how, and I was like, man, it's like AIDS, that's the closest thing that we would have to really compare it to, I think, is like, everybody's like, oh my God, I can't hug you, or I can't whatever. Right. And, it doesn't even matter how many times you read all these newspaper articles and watch all these specials about how that shit is not true. People still hang on to that, and it's like a huge stigma. So,
Well, yeah, you say leprosy is such a horrifying word in and of itself. It's just like, even not really knowing what it is, when you say leprosy, you're just like, want to get away. I mean, it just has that, flight reaction.
It really does. And I think that's why they renamed it.
Well, yeah, I thought that was smart for them to rename it because, Hansen's doesn't sound like shit. So.
No, all I can think of is Mbop.
Yeah.
So like patients who went to Carvel when they first got there, they actually changed their names. A bunch of them, like the administration said, take on a new identity. So the people who worked inside the leprosarium, they didn't generally even know the patients' real names or their histories or anything. And it made me think of when you were talking about the psych hospital, and you were saying people would go away and you'd think that Grandpa just got a job on the railroad or something like that, and they would not realize that he got buried.
That he
in a mental
died
hospital.
in the hospital and they buried him. And
exactly.
Don't know what happened.
And it's exactly the same thing. Yeah. So there were a lot of families that, only one family member knew that this person had contracted the disease and went to Carvel. And then they would be the keeper of the memory.
Right. And they're less likely to go around saying, well, grandma's over in the island, kind of deal, or she contracted leprosy. That's not something that you really want to
No, because again, everybody thought, so they would think the whole family had it. Exactly. And people whole families lost jobs, marriages, families went away. There was a story about a woman whose house was burned down by her community because her husband got admitted to Carvel.
Oh, wow.
So, there was a graveyard on site because they actually couldn't even transport the bodies out easily. So if the family did want the bodies back after they passed away at the facility,
I'm surprised they didn't have them cremated.
Yeah, I am too, actually. But I don't know, maybe they thought that there was a contagion in cremation. Because they had special, I think metal lined coffins is what they said. And they had to completely disinfect the bodies and then seal the coffins. And to transfer them across state lines, they had to get permission from every single health department of every single state they were transferring to. So that was it was really hard. So they had a very overfull, more than 1,000 people in an on-site graveyard there. If patients' families kept contact with them, it was really hard for them to get there because, like I said, 350 acres in this remote area of Louisiana, but a 12-foot tall fence with barbed wire on the top.
Shit.
And the families of patients with young children, they would smuggle kids in under blankets or rugs in the car because kids under 16 weren't even allowed in the facility at all. So could you imagine being if you're a young parent and you have little kids at home and you go to this hospital, you won't be able to see your kids until they're 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
So people didn't come home. They weren't ever going to. But, like I said, in the 40s, it was non-contagious. And in the 50s, they created the treatment. So people did get cured. And early on when they went before all that stuff happened, it really looked like a leper colony, the way you picture in your head. Patients were covered in sores and bandages, toes and fingers missing. The dressing clinic stayed open every day, all day, because there were so many injuries all the time that there were always people in the dressing clinic. Wow. But then once the treatments were developed, people would get, and if they got treated early enough, it's just like normal folks. They're just normal folks without any physical problems that you can see.
Right.
And they're just in this facility. But they weren't allowed to have paper money because they were worried that, money changing hands could get outside of the facility and pass on contagion. So they were only allowed to have coinage.
Right.
And any money that did leave the facility was chemically sanitized. For a long time, they actually baked all the mail in a 300-degree oven before they sent it out of the facility. Because they were afraid that they would pass on contagion through the mail system. For an hour. They would bake your mail for an hour.
It is mind-boggling that they got into, the late 1800s and the early... After this has been going on since biblical times, and they have not figured out, who gets it and who doesn't get it.
Yeah.
It was... The way that they're treating it, though, it seems like they think... Never mind. It's just mind-boggling.
Well, no, it really is, though. And I think that's one of those things when it's something like this that's so based on that disfigurement fear.
So it's not like the flu of 1920 where it wiped out a million people or whatever. If it's as contagious as they thought it was, then everybody would have it. The whole cities and towns would have it.
But isn't it crazy, though? What does it say about our psychology that we're more afraid of something that's going to make us ugly than we are of something that's going to fucking kill us.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, isn't that crazy?
Vanity.
But
humanity, right?
But so the folks in this facility weren't given the right to vote until 1946. They couldn't vote when they were admitted in Carville. They weren't allowed to marry each other or anybody else until 1950. But they, like, because they had this community and they were, like, isolated from everybody else, but they had their people. And so they had their own newspaper. They had their own barbershop. They had their own parades. Like, one of the things, so I'll talk about that later. But, like, people created their own economy and their own society inside the walls of Carville. And a lot of them, like, they had sports teams. They had, so there were a lot of people that were actually fairly
Active
content
had a
where
life.
they were. Yeah. Quarantine was loosened a lot in the 60s. And in the 60s, it was renamed from the Leper colony to the Hansen's Disease Center. And they developed outpatient programs because of this, like, multi-drug treatment where they had actually cured the disease. They did develop outpatient programs, but the quarantine, like I said, wasn't legally lifted until the 90s.
Wow.
But patients had nowhere to go. So all the people who had stayed there and been there, they haven't hardly even, like, spoken to their families, some of them, in the entire time that they've been there. And they didn't. And so a lot of people would actually leave and then come back and ask to be readmitted because they're like, there's nothing for me here. Like, I can't live out here. And so, and especially if they didn't have it caught early and they did have some deformities.
Right.
I mean, they had visual
evidence.
They had
people that were
had
accepting them, in that community. And so, yeah, you want to stay where people accept you and not look at you, like you're diseased.
Yeah.
Or then you're, ground zero.
Yeah. And even to the point where they finally did close, they didn't close this place until 99. But at one point earlier than that, like during the Clinton administration, like they moved the actual clinical facility to Baton Rouge and 40 patients were still living there and asked to stay.
Wow.
Because they were like, this is our home. Like, this is where we want to be. And so the facility now is it's a museum. So you can go to Carville.
Okay.
And you can go to the Hansen's Museum in Carville. And there was a Vice. I love Vice. Vice has given me, like, leads everywhere, but there was a Vice magazine article on this too. And it said one of the most striking artifacts in the museum is a small float stylized as a red Chinese dragon. From a distance, it looks like a mini version of what you might see promenading through the French Quarter on Fat Tuesday, but a closer look shows that the float is constructed from occupational therapy department's casting and bandaging material, and it's precisely sized and shaped to fit over a wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
So, like, they made art and shit,
Yeah,
I mean, they
work.
really did their thing where they were, but
then let life get them down.
I know. So you were asking about, like, whether it crossed like class boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, they don't 100% know where this comes from, but in 2011 the New England Journal of Medicine published an article formally linking the armadillo to human leprosy cases.
I heard that. I remember reading that.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
The armadillos that were tested in the study shared the exact same strain of the disease that infects humans.
Oh my God.
And so there are still endemic cases of leprosy being discovered in the United States. A lot of the ones that are more recent are specifically, like, within the southern half of Louisiana.
Armadillos are
you
not
might
good
have more
pets.
Impoverished communities if you're eating armadillo meat. There's a possibility that might have something to do with some of that, but they don't really know for sure.
Wow.
But there is a potential link because that's the only other creature that shares that disease strain with the humans. So
wow.
Armadillos, don't fuck with them.
Do not fuck with armadillos. Ostracized. Right?
And that's I totally geeked out on this. I was like, oh my God, this is fascinating.
It is fascinating. So if you're going to go visit the museum, you just drive through Lumberton, you hit the nuke testing site, and then you keep heading west towards Louisiana.
Yep. We need that map.
We do need that map. I know. I got
That'll
two
be
more weeks of school.
Yes.
As soon as school is done, watch out.
All the things.
All the things. Doing all the things.
So I guess that's it.
That is it. Well, hope everybody has a great day, and sorry for being a couple of days late.
And hopefully we'll be back on schedule this weekend for Friday.
For Friday. Yes. We'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.
That's
Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at thestrangesouthpodcast.com or on our website, thestrangesouth.com.
Yes, thank you. And what they did is they detonated a 5.3 kiloton. Shit.
Kiloton.
Kiloton. Thank you.